So as we ease families out, right, we do lots of different strategies, right? If you think about your end goal is a child falling asleep independently on their own, how do you get there? So you can ease out over time, but you can also do things like we have parents leave for 5 minutes, come back and lie down with them, then leave for 10 minutes and come back and lie down with them to give them practice being alone. Or we have people, parents come back every 5 minutes, just give another kiss goodnight. Yeah, I will always be back. One key thing is a parent better set an alarm for themselves, because the night they get distracted by their own social media, that's it, right? Then the child is always worried that they're never going to come back. So we do lots and lots of strategies. Middle of the night. So what we know about sleep, and I'll just go back to some basics about sleep. So basics about sleep is we all wake up numerous times per night. 2 to 6 times per night. Everybody wakes up, whether you're 2 or whether you're 15 or whether you're 45. Whatever is present or happens at bedtime is what you need to return back to sleep. So if you're falling asleep with your parent in the room, all the lights on in the house and the light on in the hallway, and you wake up in the middle of the night because now your parent has left, the lights are all out, you're not going to be able to fall back asleep. We want the bedroom to be exactly the same at 2 in the morning as it's going to be when you fall asleep. So as long as you have a parent falling asleep with you at bedtime, you're going to need that to fall back to sleep in the middle of the night. As long as you have the music playing, the lights on, the hallway on, all that at bedtime, you're going to need it in the middle of the night. So we want people to work backwards. Think about what it's going to be like at 2 in the morning and make it the same. Now, if you're going to have music playing all night, that's fine. Then you can have music playing at bedtime, you can have music playing all night. But to expect kids to fall asleep with all this help at bedtime and then think that they can not need it in the middle of the night, you can't expect that, and it's not really reasonable to expect. I think people think that once you fall asleep, you sleep all night. And so it's all about getting them to sleep and then you'll just see them in the morning. We wake up all the time during the night. And I think once parents hear that, they start to understand, like, why is she waking up at 3 in the morning? She's supposed to wake up at 3 in the morning. We all wake up at 3 in the morning. It's how can we have her feel that the situation and what we call them sleep associations are the same. So if you want changes in the middle of the night, you have to make changes at bedtime. And so you do have to start at bedtime. While you're working on bedtime, as long as you're there or you're lying down with them or you're sitting in their room, you either need to reenact it in the middle of the night or, do something as an interim measure. So maybe it is having them still come into your room in the middle of the night and sleep in your bed. Or we do a lot of making kind of nests for kids where there's a place on the floor in the parent's bedroom where there's a blow up mattress or a sleeping bag or something where the kids can just come in there, and parents will say, as long as you don't wake me, you can come in and sleep in there. And that's fine. If that works for the family and that's best for everybody, I think that's totally appropriate as they work on doing things at bedtime. In the middle of the night at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, everyone's exhausted. No one can cope. It's not the time to just practice new coping skills. You got to really develop it when you're awake.
It sounds like, we're similar. What works for one family may not work for another. And it's about being flexible and, helping them in terms of, getting their needs met, but at the same time, not enabling, but it's flexibility too in this process and trying to create that structure, consistency, routine, predictability in the best way possible. But what works for that family? And I love that because that's what you're saying. I mean, there's some families that are absolutely not. I do not want my kids in my room. And then these kids feel like, and I'm not saying they should, but if that doesn't work, we're not going to push that. But if it works and the family's like, oh, we have 2 big couches and we're good with that, then that works and we'll make that work because eventually they wean out. And I find the less the family's rigid about it themselves and the more the child feels safe because of that flexibility, the quicker they are able to sleep on their own. Do you find that too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, and I always talk about this. So I told you I work in this interdisciplinary team, and one of my former physician colleagues, she would, because what happens is because we're a teaching hospital, trainee goes in, comes back out, tells us what's going on, and then we all come up with a plan. And so she says, I'm going to order a sleep study, and I'm going to start them on a nasal steroid, and I'm going to do all this. And she'll look at me and she say, what are you going to do? And I'll be like, I don't know. I mean, we've had this conversation hundreds of times. And she would look at me like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, I don't know until I meet with the family. I need to find out what are their goals, what's a step that they feel that they can take, what's reasonable and appropriate that they can do. And some families are like, it's fine. Just, have them come in at 4 in the morning. I don't care. I just want to solve bedtime or, whatever it's going to be. So it is about flexibility and working with families and being a team in this process of what is your final goal and let's help you get to that goal.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's very, very helpful. No, this is great. One of the things that you talk about is how sleep difficulties affect social and academic functioning. Obviously, with academics, we can kind of get an idea of what that means. They're not up to par, their mind's not working to the best it can work. Of course, plays a role in that too. So I can understand the academic piece. Talk to me a little bit about the social piece, because that's such a big piece for our kids with SM, social communication. And so what would be a layman way of explaining that? How is it affecting their ability to socialize, lack of sleep or sleep difficulty?
It's interesting. Most of the research that I do, I mean, clinically, I see every age. Most of the research I do is with little ones, 0 to 3-year-olds. And we often will look at sleep at a certain age in babies and then follow the families for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And the thing that we always find every single time is that poor sleep at a certain period of time, at the same time or predictive for later times, is social emotional development. It's not as much cognitive. The cognitive aspects are really how you slept last night affects how well you do today. It doesn't really affect long-term IQ, what we think of as IQ. There's so many things that affect that. I mean, nutrition and parent interaction and language and reading and all that stuff. But that sleep really affects that social emotional development. It's that how, and again, it's next day. If I'm so tired, I can't manage these coping skills. I'm just falling apart. I can't regulate my emotions. And longer term is that every day that you're socially, emotionally, struggling sets up for continuing struggling. Kids and peers, if you're struggling day after day after day with them and you're not connecting with them, they're going to move on to another kid to go play with. And, it's sad to say, but it's really true that versus, reading or whatever, you're going to continue that and teacher's going to work with you with that. So we do see that we want kids to get as the best sleep that they can so they can be alert, awake, they can regulate their emotions, they can manage and do those coping skills, they can do that self-talk about, that's just my bossy voice telling me this thing. I don't have to keep talking about whatever is worrying me. So we really see that in, peer relationships and family relationships, that getting enough sleep is really important. And you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast about parents. We want parents getting enough sleep too, so they can help their child. Because a really well rested parent is going to be the best parent they can be too. And they're going to have the patience to have you kids practice those coping skills and do those hard things that they have to do and be present themselves and be less anxious themselves. You talked about often anxious kids have anxious parents, often anxious parents have anxious kids. Lowering everybody's anxiety by getting sleep is going to really help.